Once upon a time, on a sunlit cliff, there was a fairy tale beautiful kingdom called Nyande. Its people worshipped the goddess of mercy, Verdelia, and lived each day in well-being. However, 100 years ago, war engulfed the kingdom. Evil demons appeared, eager to take over the territory. Gradually, held hostage by the war, Nyande was reduced to ruins. It was only after a long time that the Great War still ended in victory. With peace restored, the kingdom of Nyande was at the very dawn of its history. The joyful merchant called out to the familiar maid. He wanted to ask her a lot of questions, as it had been a long time since they had seen each other. But he was disturbed by the fact that she looked too depressed. The man asked if the princess had done something strange. The maid shared that she had a lot on her mind in the past few days. The maid said that there had been many strange rumors about the princess for a long time. Almost all the townspeople said that she could use a human instead of a footstool. And even her holy sword had long been stained with blood. The vendor was surprised, for he had previously thought that such a thing could not be true. The maid said that in reality, the princess was even worse than rumored. Vandalism was a common occurrence for her. A couple months ago, she had developed a weapon, experimented with it, and destroyed almost the entire castle. The other day, the princess had even stated that she was not going to get married. Many people were concerned that the girl was having such strange and wrong thoughts. A young boy took her hands and asked her if it was possible that he had allowed himself some disrespectful act towards her. The boy was desperate for an answer, for he was only hurt at the mere thought of his chosen one shedding tears behind her armor. Suddenly, the girl jumped straight at the guy. The king was shocked by this behavior. After that, His Majesty had to crawl on his knees in front of the prince of a neighboring country because his daughter's behavior almost led to war. In the royal castle, various problems were constantly occurring because of the princess. The servants came to the conclusion that it was simply impossible to stop such a thing. In any case, the princess is still a descendant of the great knight Arthur, who saved the kingdom from destruction 100 years ago. Then another passerby intervened in the conversation, saying that such a vicious princess can't be of any use. She always uses powerful force for less than the best purposes. However, her ancestors took it upon themselves to subdue the demons and were able to protect the kingdom. Now, no monster could so easily appear in these lands and sway their rights. Another stranger approached the shop and said that thanks to this defense, many townspeople could sleep peacefully. The others agreed with this. Besides, the story of adventure is very much liked by children. The townsman confirmed that his daughter also asked for him to tell her more such stories. Despite the princess's nasty character, the people of the kingdom should still be grateful to her that a new era has begun. It would be terrible if someone so powerful became their enemy. The townspeople were confident that the demons would be able to deal with them easily. That was why it was good that there was a princess. Only the maid couldn't understand why they were saying that. In fact, the people's fear and envy towards the princess was incredibly huge. According to the stories, the princess considers herself the navel of the earth and does as she pleases. She is more like a tyrant. The king had to deal with all the problems that arise from her bad, childish character. The princess was doing tremendous damage to their holdings as well as their reputation. Letters were constantly coming from neighboring kingdoms, in which the heads of state frankly expressed their displeasure. The king could barely cope with all the problems. Day by day, the damage increased. Only one day did all this horror finally stop. A servant burst into the king's chambers. The head of state frightenedly asked what had happened this time on this beautiful afternoon. The guy did not stop to say that it was very urgent. As it turned out, right now the princess was on her way to her father. But the king was surprised, because it seemed to him that she was currently resting in the first-level monster habitat area. The servant also thought so, but just recently a telegram arrived saying that the princess had arrived at the castle. Suddenly, the princess suddenly appeared. All present were surprised that she wore a dress this time. The king looked pleadingly at the servant, for perhaps he knew what the matter was. The young man waved his hands negatively. The princess called the king daddy, after which he immediately shuddered. The girl asked what was wrong with his face. She suggested that her father might have been sad in her absence. In fact, the king almost had a heart attack, for the girl was dressed in an outfit too strange for her. The father told his daughter that she looked fresh, and it suited her very well. The king finally got the courage to ask Atina why she was dressed so strangely today. The princess said that she is a lady, and so she sometimes wants to flutter around like a true spring flower. The everyday image of a spring flower was very different from what the girl actually did on a regular basis. The princess admitted that, in truth, she hurried to the castle because she really wanted to tell the king something. His Majesty was even frightened to think what it could be about. Then the girl declared that she was going to get married. Everyone present was shocked by such news. No one could not even imagine that she would ever have such a desire. For 22 whole years, she had been indifferent to all living beings, not to mention men. And even the prince who had been engaged to her had been rejected, and now she was talking about marriage. At last, this marvelous event took place. His Majesty the King assumed that the heavens had decided to give thanks. Etina's father began to blossom before his eyes. He couldn't believe that his daughter had become so grown up. The king declared that as a father, he sincerely respected his daughter's decision. The shocked servant watched in silence. The princess assumed that the king would be against it, for she always spoils everything. His Majesty said that sometimes she made him nervous, but even so, it was very difficult for him to go against her will. The king realized that if Etina met her other half, it meant nothing less than that he would finally stop being a slave to a girl's whims and become a completely free man. For 22 whole years he had taken care of the princess. This short period of childhood seemed like an eternity to the old man. The king mentally thanked the goddess of mercy Verdelia, because he was so sincerely happy that soon the princess will leave her father's house forever. She would now become another man's headache. The king was sure that her character would surely change after marriage. He hoped that his future son-in-law would have a quiet life. His Majesty asked who the man his daughter wanted to be married to was. The father was willing to put up with even a farmer or a soldier. He promised that he would accept any young man she chose. Then Etina declared that her chosen one was the Demon King. The girl even repeated her words for more convincing. The princess's declaration of marriage quickly went viral. The people of Niande were stunned by such news. The people blessed her without knowing the details. There were indifferent people. There were those who absolutely did not believe in the success of the marriage, and there were those who were curious to know how events would unfold in the future. However, there were also those to whom such a marriage seemed absolutely wrong, because their kingdom was not in favor of demons and monsters. The unhappy king spoke of how he himself was about to go mad. Count Nectu von Diemen, once a brave knight, understood that his highness had a lot of troubles, but he needed to report the news. The kingdom had been living in fear of demons for many years. 100 years ago, there was a war that took a huge number of human lives with it to the other world. Fortunately, thanks to Knight Arthur, peace was able to be restored. Countless people were killed by demons. And how, after such a descendant of Arthur can tie himself in marriage with an unholy monster, a noble knight would turn over in his grave at such horror. The king assumed that now he would have to beg forgiveness from his ancestors. His Majesty began to weep, but the count begged the old man to pull himself together. It seemed to the former knight that now was the time to show his firm character. Suddenly, it was heard that someone entered the king's chambers. It was Shane Vicon, a scholar from the university, a childhood friend of the princess and a counselor. The young man bowed politely before the king. The overjoyed king immediately ran to Shane. The counselor started talking excitedly to the king about the routine. The young man had been up to his ears in robotics lately, so there was no way he could drop in on the king. His Majesty asked the counselor for a visit at least once in a while. The king also told Shane that he was the only one who could subdue Etina. In His Majesty's opinion, this guy was so brilliant that he could handle the princess from an early age. The king kept pressing the young man since he and Etina were the best of friends. His Majesty felt that his daughter was lucky to have such a trustworthy person by her side. Shane was also not in favor of marrying the Demon King, but he thought the princess should be more trustworthy. The Duke couldn't believe his ears. It seemed to him that this young man's words were completely delusional. Sir Nectu said that even if it was a marriage of convenience, it should not be allowed, for it would bring the honor of the late Knight Arthur into disrepute. The Duke and the Knight continued to argue with each other. Shane argued that being related to King Arthur should not burden the princess. The argument suddenly turned into a real fight. Shane said that the princess had always served the people and had done more for the townspeople than they could ever imagine. Etina also had every right to personal happiness. All the more reason for the kingdom to take this chance and establish friendly relations with the demon lands. The Duke collapsed on the floor and declared that he couldn't listen to this absurdity anymore. There was no way he would agree to have friendly relations with the vile demons. He shouted that as long as his eyes were clear, this marriage could not take place. The king asked the earl to calm down, but he could not calm down because he could not understand how it was possible to act in such a way when the life of the entire kingdom was at stake. What would they do if the demon took over the princess's mind? Or what would happen if it had already happened? Shannon asked the count not to say such rude things. Suddenly, the doors opened unexpectedly. The girl announced that she did not agree. No one present was interested in this engagement. Etina declared that they were discussing very amusing things here. The Duke and the counselor were frightened when they saw the princess in her dress. They even gave up fighting because of this sight. The king asked what brought the princess here. Then she said that she wanted to know how the marriage was progressing. It also turned out that the girl had heard absolutely the entire conversation while she was standing outside the door. The princess wanted those present to continue the conversation about her ancestors, for she was very interested to know the continuation. Putting her blade to the earl's throat, the girl asked him how he only dared to swear before this holy sword. Shannon excitedly begged the girl for her to stop. The counselor said that everyone just wanted to know why the princess had made such a strange decision. The girl then asked if they were really that interested in her love story. A startled Shannon said that everyone would really like to hear about it. Etina said she just had no choice if everyone was so interested in hearing about it. The count was still sitting on her lap. It wasn't that long ago, when the girl had finished subduing the monsters in one of the lands. The territory of the northwestern border was almost completely overrun when the princesses were on vacation. Then the girl had to urgently head out to conquer the rest of the terrifying monsters. The demons excitedly shouted that humans had no right to invade them without permission. The girl then claimed that they were the ones who had invaded their territories. Many were frightened, for it was rumored that the girl could defeat a dragon with one single hand. The princess said that she would keep them alive if they would get out of sight in 5 seconds. The servant said that sometimes the girl acted like the truest demon. Suddenly, Etina noticed a strange wind near her. It was at that moment the beautiful princess first met her future demonic spouse. This bastard turned out to be quite strong, so the girl was not sure that she would be able to defeat him with only one sword. The princess bravely entered the battle. Suddenly, she noticed how she suddenly cut off the horn of a beautiful young man. The girl was certain that this man was the Demon King. The young man said that there was no need to shed blood in vain. And then His Majesty suddenly disappeared. Etina said that since that day, she still couldn't forget about him. It was the first time she felt something like that. Moreover, that young man was majestic, charismatic, and had a firm character. In addition to that, he was also the owner of a rather handsome face. Shannon then asked the princess if she was going to get married just because of the strange young man's good looks. It seemed that Etina saw absolutely no problem with that. Apparently, she could only think about his beautiful physical features. Her soul was clearly of no interest to her. But most importantly, before the princess had not met anyone who could fight with her on an equal footing. The girl considered it fate that she managed to meet such a strong young man in her life, worthy of her love at first sight. Therefore, Etina decided that she would ask him to marry her right away. However, the girl did not know that the guy would refuse her proposal. The Demon King was definitely sure that he would not enter into this marriage, as he did not want to fulfill the needs of humans. In his reply, the young man asked the girl not to carry this nonsense. Shannon told her friend that she was heartbroken. However, it did not mean that she had to stop her choice on this particular man. The king began to reassure his daughter, saying that there are many more equally worthy candidates in the world who will be able to recognize the charms of his daughter, Princess Etina. Strangely enough, the girl said that it was all right, for there was nothing to be done about it. The princess knew she wished for too much. Thanking her father for his support, Etina got ready to retire to her chambers. The king thought it was unbelievable, for he expected her to throw a tantrum. However, the princess humbly accepted the answer. It was as if the girl had been replaced. Then Shannon thought that perhaps the princess had really fallen in love for the first time in her life. In the evening, the childhood friend looked into Etina's chambers. The girl asked what brought him at such a late hour. As it turned out, the young man came to check if everything was all right with his close friend. He must have thought the girl would be bawling in 3 streams. Athena could make many men cry, but it would be foolish for her to shed a single tear for any of them. Shannon was still worried since the girl had been indifferent to everyone before. However, the princess told the young man not to worry about it. She herself now realized that she would not be able to get everything her soul desired just by one wish. She couldn't just stand her ground until the end of time. It was a shame that her first love had ended so quickly. Shannon told the girl that he would absolutely always support her. The princess thanked her friend happily. Athena asked how Count Nektu was feeling, for he must have been very happy that the engagement had failed. The young counselor said that the man was shaken by the news that the princess was going to make an offering to the demons. Then Athena suggested that it would be a good idea to taunt him. Shannon wondered what the girl was thinking right now. Athena said that instead of suffering rejection, she had decided to form a friendly relationship. The counselor said that was a very noble thought, for even at times like this, the princess continued to think of her kingdom. Noticing a tear on her friend's cheek, Athena told him that he was a crybaby. The kingdom decided to send a wagon to the demons as a tribute. Some of the townspeople were outraged, for they felt that His Majesty was allowing too much of these vile monsters. It turned out that after the princess was rejected, she intended to end the ridiculous feud with the demon kingdom. To many residents, this decision seemed very noble and logical. The king rejoiced, for if the princess did manage to make a peace agreement, it would mean that there would be peace and tranquility in their country. Shannon also saw it as a good chance to smooth over all the conflicts that often resulted in more serious military proceedings in the aftermath. His Majesty told his counselor that it was a great idea that despite being denied marriage, he had decided to promote reconciliation by making an offering and thus raising the status of the kingdom. The king continued to lash out at the young man. However, Shane argued, saying that the idea belonged to the princess. His Majesty was very surprised to hear such a thing. Suddenly, one of the servants burst in and said that they were in trouble. It turned out that the princess had decided to travel with the wagon to the demon kingdom. Athena couldn't believe that she had managed to fool everyone so easily. Even her own father and closest friend didn't know the girl well enough if they thought she could admit defeat so easily. The princess was outraged that the demon king dared to reject her. The girl said that she would do something to him, after which he could not live without her. The king was told that a wagon from the kingdom of Nyande was about to arrive. His Majesty told the servant to step back. The demon king stated that his head was beginning to swell because of the humans. A counselor came into the chambers and stated that it was very strange that until yesterday, the Nyande kingdom was sending troops to conquer. And now, after one wedding refusal, it was suddenly starting to send tribute. The man couldn't understand what was really going on in this kingdom. The young man asked Daigle not to disturb him and to leave the king's chambers. The counselor said he had something suitable to lessen His Majesty's pain. The king's castle is directly ahead. The soldiers should have stood around the wagon, for it wouldn't be long before they arrived at the place. The knight was surprised to notice a cloud of sand behind him. It turned out to be Counselor Shane riding up. The young man asked his friend why she had decided to do such a thing. He was angry that Athena, without saying anything, had stolen the wagon and gone straight to the demon kingdom. Also, Shannon couldn't understand why the princess decided to change into a maid costume. Then Athena told him not to worry because she had the perfect plan. Shannon continued to be angry. The princess didn't seem to realize that if she was caught, the kingdom could then be in huge trouble. The girl said she would explain everything to him now. The princess asked the young man to listen very carefully. When the wagon arrives at the king's house, the servants will say that they have come to give an offering. Then Athena will pretend to be a maid. Shannon didn't understand what good that plan did. It would all begin when the servants that were sent to him as an offering were brought before the king. The girl said that when His Majesty walked past her, she would look piercingly straight into his eyes. And then the king would realize that all this time, a girl with such striking beauty had lived not far from him. The young man will immediately fall in love and propose to the princess. That was the way she was going to get him. To Shannon, this idea seemed absolutely horrible. Nevertheless, he could do nothing, because right now he had to return to the delegation without anyone noticing his absence. The carriage came to an abrupt halt. The counselor pleaded with the girl not to bring things to a catastrophe. The king was about to appear. The delegations of the Nyande kingdom were ordered to line up at the entrance. The girl pondered over the words of her close friend. Apparently, the young man had underestimated her. The girl began to ponder on how quickly she could slay the Demon King. Noticing his majesty, the princess thought that the inhabitants of this country looked pretty cool. The servants offered the king a glance at the prepared offering. It seemed to the princess that absolutely everything was going according to plan. Etina raised her head and looked at the Demon King with an innocent look. The girl felt satisfied, for the mission had been accomplished perfectly. She assumed that the king had undoubtedly fallen in love with her. His Majesty then ordered the gifts to be moved to the warehouse, and all the maids to be put under the control of the head Moroka. However, Princess Etina was out of luck as the king ordered her to be arrested right away. His Majesty suggested that she might be the murderer that was lurking amongst the offerings. The girl began to loudly resent this. The king stated that the look she had looked at him with was full of cruelty. His Majesty once again ordered that the girl be arrested and searched. The guards ordered the suspicious lady to surrender. Then Shannon stood up for Etina, calling her one of the most elite maids in their kingdom. Sure, she looked intimidating and her temper was rough, but there was no way King Nyanda would have sent an assassin. The counselor had guaranteed this on behalf of himself and the entire delegation. Shannon looked at the princess pleadingly for her to say something in her defense. The girl started to justify herself, arguing with her strange look that she really wanted to work for the Demon King. Thankfully, the princess was let go. Then the head Morok told all the maids to go after her. From now on, this castle was to be their new workplace. The princess realized that she would have to embark on a backup plan, that is, to stall for time and work as a maid. And when she got the chance, she would undoubtedly make the Demon King her property. A couple of weeks later, the girl realized that it was almost impossible. The unfortunate princess came here for the king, but now she had to deal with cleaning, as well as other errands, which gradually began to get very annoying. The head Morok began to reprimand the girl for lying on the bed in the middle of the day. However, as it turned out, Etina had long ago completed all her errands. Nevertheless, the Morok said that she still had something to give to the girl. It turned out that Etina would soon need to serve the guests during the soiree. The girl threw her arms around the Morok, for it meant that she would have a chance to meet the king. Meanwhile, an unknown girl was eavesdropping on this conversation. It seemed very ridiculous to her that a human being was rejoicing, even though she didn't even know what would happen on the day of the event. So the day of the long-awaited dinner party arrived. The unfortunate Princess Etina, as expected, was sent by her maid to the dinner. It was only a pity that the princess, who had never done anything like this before, was not much suited for such a job. The girl spilled the soup and started apologizing. In fact, everything happened exactly as she had planned. The princess did not give up hope that this time His Majesty would definitely fall in love with her. It was the perfect plan. However, in reality, Etina didn't even have a chance to get close to the king as he was too far away from her. After a while, Morok said that each maid would be assigned to nobles, and she would take care of the king's service herself. Morok pointed with her hand to the nobleman that Etina would have to serve. The princess was disappointed, for before she had thought that tonight's dinner party would be a great opportunity to get closer to the king, but now her plan was slipping into a deep abyss. Etina had to be content with the fact that she could at least admire his beautiful face from a distance. Suddenly, the girl heard a familiar scent. She could not remember, but there was something unpleasant about it. Suddenly, the girl rushed at the king, but she was not lucky, because the king ordered to capture the intruder. Then the princess told the guards that they should focus their attention on something else. Suddenly, one of the maids cried out, for right at that moment the chowder ate the plate. Then, Etina was outraged, because it seemed as if the demons did not recognize odors at all. It was a horrible poison that would begin to spread throughout the body as soon as it touched the tongue. The servants began to speculate that there might be an assassin in the castle. A counselor suddenly intervened in the conversation, saying that he too knew something about this poison. This substance was very strong, but the plant used to make this poison only grows in the human world, deep within the forest of the Nyande kingdom. It was amazing that this poison was able to go straight into the royal food. The princess then asked the counselor if he suspected her of attempting to assassinate the Demon King. The counselor told Etina that they should suspect her, since the incident happened right after the humans showed up at the castle. The girl then said that the first thing to do was to check the people who prepared the dish. The counselor said that the cook was the head of the maids in the king's castle, and besides, There was no need for demons to make an attempt on His Majesty. The girl said that if she was that agile, she could quickly decapitate the counselor. The man caustically replied to the girl that even if she was innocent, the guards could behead her to set a good example for the rest of the servants. The king ordered everyone present to finish with the senseless swearing. His Majesty said that Dagel's words made sense, after all. Considering that the poisonous plant only grows in human territory, it was very suspicious. However, it was not worth forgetting that this girl had saved the king's life right now. It was impossible to deny this fact because of unfounded suspicions. The king ordered the servants to let Athena go. Besides, this wasn't the first time an attempt on his life had been made. His Majesty ordered to finish his dinner as his appetite was spoiled. The princess was angry at the bastard who suggested beheading her. If it wasn't for the king, she would have immediately put the bastard in his place. Although the king didn't treat her in the best way either. The girl was human, however. She couldn't understand why His Majesty kept looking at her with such anger. In any case, it couldn't go on like this. She would not tolerate being treated so negligently twice. Athena pondered on how she should deal with this bastard. He would have to beg for her forgiveness. The princess rejoiced at how pleasant the night air was, and the number of rooms in the castle delighted her as well. The girl imagined that her favorite demon was sleeping sweetly in one of them. Athena decided to find the king, not because she wanted to see him, but because she wanted to ask what had provoked such an unfair attitude towards her. The girl climbed through one of the windows and spotted His Majesty right in front of her. Athena was surprised that she had managed to find his chambers the first time. On the way here, the princess's heart was filled with anger, but it immediately melted away when she saw the king's beautiful face. However, the king was not alone, for in his room was a certain unfamiliar demoness. The princess was surprised that her cute little lion cub had some other girl besides herself. Athena felt puzzled, for she did not know how she should properly proceed. Perhaps it would be better if she coldly wished him happiness and just walked out of his life. The king fell asleep on that girl's lap. Then the stranger suddenly pulled out a dagger to bid farewell to His Majesty forever. Of course, noticing the attempt on the king's life, the princess immediately ran to the assassin. The girl sharply pulled out a knife and put it right to the throat of the attacker. Hearing the noise, His Majesty woke up. However, the stranger immediately fled from the scene. The king asked Athena what she was doing in his chambers. Suddenly, His Majesty fell to the floor. The girl ran up to him to help him. The princess could not understand why he fell asleep at such a moment. Waking up, the king was surprised, because for some reason the sun was shining, which was clearly exotic in the underworld. Suddenly, Athena appeared right in front of his eyes. The girl was telling His Majesty to get up, for it was already morning. The princess stated that she had prepared special light equipment for a better awakening. The girl asked the king if he was able to get a good night's sleep. His Majesty inquired why the maid had spent the whole night with him. The princess said that she had stayed because he had not ordered her to leave. The king felt that the girl could have just left him. He had heard something about an assassin not too long ago, and yesterday he was about to be attacked with chowder. The young man asked the girl how she knew there was an assassin in his chambers today. The princess was clearly agitated, as she had shown up here without permission as well. Athena stated that it was completely unimportant. The girl asked the king why he immediately fell asleep if he had heard everything. The boy confessed that he had been attempted on countless times since he was a child. Because of this, he couldn't sleep well, especially lately. The king had insomnia. He couldn't fall asleep so easily, as each dream could be his last. It meant that if the king fell asleep again, he would simply be killed. His Majesty had tried many ways to fall asleep, and the pleaser was one of them. The princess breathed a sigh of relief, for it appeared that that stranger was a stranger to him. The king felt depressed, for now he could no longer trust anyone. Even the one who was brought by his subordinates turned out to be a traitor. However, Athena said that she knew a proven way for the king to get a good night's sleep. The girl suggested that he trust her. Previously, the king would have thought it absurd to trust a stranger, but perhaps he should listen to her just once. The princess led the king to the wasteland, but he could not understand how it was related to his dream. The girl said she brought him here out of respect, for she didn't want the other servants to be able to see his weak side. The king still couldn't understand what it was all about. The girl asked the young man if he was willing to do anything for a good night's sleep. Athena said that in that case, he would have to do 100 squats, 100 push-ups, and 100 abs. On top of that, run 10 kilometers and repeat such a workout every day. The king wanted to object to something, but the girl ordered him to get down to business. The frightened prince started doing push-ups. The girl was amazed at his strength. Soon, their training even turned into mountaineering. The king performed absolutely everything that the princess ordered him to do. As it turned out, it was a little hard for His Majesty, since he had not loaded his body with physical activity for a long time. The young man felt powerlessness in his body. In her arms, the girl carried the king to the bed and promised that she would keep a close eye on him while he was sweetly sleeping. Sitting on his knees, the servant apologized to his lord, for he did not know that the lady he had sent away turned out to be an assassin. The servant asked to be killed, for there was no better punishment for such a sin than death. However, the king had no intention of getting rid of his subordinate so easily. His Majesty ordered him to stop bowing, for he knew that his counselor was loyal to the kingdom. The king was sure that the incident was just a simple misunderstanding. The counselor was very surprised when he noticed that His Highness was yawning. It seemed that the king had long since gotten used to insomnia and had stopped feeling tired. His Majesty boasted that he had been feeling much better lately. The counselor was happy to hear this. He added that he would avoid such incidents much more carefully in the future to prove his loyalty to the king. The counselor also asked if he could ask him something before he left. The man asked if the preparations for their plan were going well. The king said there was nothing to worry about. What worried the counselor was that His Majesty had begun to seem more careless. Moreover, he had heard rumors that the king had begun to frequent a human. It was the same servant girl. The man told his subordinates to keep an eye on the maid and report to him about any suspicious things happening. He also ordered them to kill her when they got a good chance to do so. Sneezing, the princess suggested that perhaps someone was talking about her right now. However, it didn't matter right now. After all, at this moment, the king had a training session going on. The girl was pushing the young man to run faster. Atina smugly praised the boy. The king asked the girl who she really was. First of all, even though Atina worked as a maid, she was very uncomfortable speaking to people in you. She treated everyone around her disrespectfully, as if she was originally from a family of nobles. In addition, the girl was so strong that she would be able to easily defeat a professional assassin. The king speculated that she might be a princess from a neighboring kingdom that he had heard so many interesting rumors about. Remembering Shennon's words that they might be killed, the girl began to awkwardly excuse herself and say that she was far from a princess. Fortunately, the king believed her. His Majesty then asked if the girl had any wish. Atina interrogated what he meant. The king said that she had saved him twice, and even now continued to spend her time to help him. In his opinion, demons should pay favor for favor, so if Atina wished for something, he could fulfill it. The girl sat right in front of the king on her knees and began to tell him what she would like. The princess had always wanted to see the demon market since she had never been to such places before. It didn't seem too different from a human one to Atina. The king was surprised, for the girl's wish turned out to be quite simple. As it turned out, the princess wished for His Majesty to go on a date with her. The girl first wanted to ask the young man to marry her, but if he did it only because of a wish, it would certainly hurt her pride. However, as it turned out, the king didn't have the slightest idea of what a date was. Atina was struck by his eyes filled with innocence. It was hard to believe that a demon king could have such a piercing and incomprehensive gaze. The girl told the king that a date is when young people walk together, eat goodies, and do many other interesting things. Atina also added that it is customary to hold hands while dating, but His Majesty chose to ignore this part of their conversation. The young man stated that there were some interesting places nearby. However, the princess didn't expect him to drag her to the market. Nevertheless, the atmosphere of the place was quite good. Suddenly, the girl heard someone call her and the king a couple. A vendor was beckoning them to look at his goods. Other vendors were also trying to interest hypothetical buyers with pretty jewelry, sweet lollipops, cute headbands, and other little things. The princess, for some reason, chose a headband with one horn broken off. Atina was quite skillful at haggling with the vendors. Suddenly, the king was distracted when he noticed the cutest plush animal on the counter. The girl asked the king if he wanted it. The salesman stated that it was not possible to redeem this toy so easily. This stuffed animal could only be obtained after winning a game. The contestant needed to score 850 points to win. Atina immediately hit the target. Having obtained the gift, the girl fairly handed it to the king. The princess said that today was a very fun day. The king was genuinely pleased that he had spent the day with pleasure. Athena was very curious about how ordinary demons lived in this kingdom. It was surprising that their lives were almost no different from human life. Now the princess knew how poorly humans and demons knew each other. Leaning over to the king, the girl asked if today had been as interesting for him. The young man wondered why Athena wanted his opinion. Then the girl replied that the point of a date was for two people to have fun at the same time. And moreover, she did not even expect that their walk would turn out to be so exciting. Suddenly, the king heard a girl shriek right behind him. It turned out to be a human specimen. The guards accused the girl of stealing. The stranger begged for mercy because her child was so hungry that she had nothing else to do but steal. The demons accused the girl of her husband being a demon hunter. The stranger continued to make excuses, for her spouse had abandoned her long ago. The enraged demon bared his blade in order to kill the desperate girl. However, Athena reacted quickly and hid the stranger behind her back. The princess told the demons to let her go immediately. However, the appearance of another human only whetted the lovers of human blood. The guard laughed, for he didn't consider the demon kingdom a place for humans. The bloodthirsty man asked Athena if she was willing to fight him for her life in demon territory. Suddenly, the king intervened and told them to stop. He didn't want this carnage to continue. The princess asked the young man why he didn't stop those demons from the beginning. Athena said that if she hadn't intervened, that girl would most likely be dead. The king then said that the only reason he got involved was because there was a threat to the demons' lives. He shouldn't have to protect humans. The princess couldn't understand that, because it would be horrible for a human to be killed so easily. The king asked Athena if she would have jumped out as well if that girl had turned out to be an ordinary demon. The young man said that he was on the side of the demons for the same reason. He has no reason to protect humans. Besides, aren't humans the ones doing the barbaric extermination of demons? The princess remembered how she had tried to defeat the demons. Knowing how Athena easily dealt with demons, people truly admired her. Then the girl said that the same goes for demons killing people. The king believed that each of them was only trying to defend themselves in this battle. Athena asked His Majesty what he thought about the war that happened 100 years ago. The young man stated that the war was instigated by humans. Therefore, Athena had no right to even start this conversation if she didn't know the whole backstory of the battle. Then the girl asked what was really the cause of the war. Athena thought that the conflict happened because the demons were trying to take away human territories. At the foot of the mountains where the demon kingdom is located, poisonous clouds were accumulating one after another. Because of these clouds, not a single ray of sunlight passed through the demon kingdom for a long time. Therefore, the demons could only grow a limited amount of crops. Food was always in short supply. And so the demons decided in search of productive land to go to the country where the sun shines all the time. However, the people felt that the demons had invaded their territory. For this reason, countless demons were killed. The demons repeatedly asked for help to dispel the cloud, as dark magic and human technology were enough to do the job. However, their requests were ignored time after time. That was why the war broke out. Although the hatred of demons is so deep, a king who struts around with a human, dishonor and misunderstanding is what caused the king to appear there. However, instead of gratitude, the princess dared to try to change His Majesty's mind. The young man declared that it had been a mistake to trust her. Perhaps the fact that she had saved his life was an elaborate plan. The king assumed that the girl wanted to gain his trust and then give the demon kingdom directly into human hands. In that case, there was no need for them to have any more meaningless conversations. That day, Athena felt angry for a long time yet. She resented how the king dared to suspect her of such sad intentions, despite the fact that she had saved his life twice. The demonic maids were very surprised at the way the irritated human was behaving. The princess even started hitting plates and crumpling the ironed linens. The maids didn't understand why they were even working here if this person was so violently destroying everything. Suddenly, noticing a bug, a maid began to scream. Then, an enraged Athena switched to the cockroach. Like a huge sumo wrestler, the girl tried to crush the insect. The terrified maid rushed to the main Maroka. Then, Athena was allowed to rest for a while. The princess recalled the king's words that it was a mistake to trust the man. Suddenly, the girl was suddenly taken by someone's shoulder. Athena turned to strike the stranger with her fist. However, the stranger skillfully dodged her powerful blow. The man said that he had no choice but to avoid her fists, since he had come at them so many times. As it turned out, it was Shane. The young man asked the princess how she had been doing all this time. The girl asked the counselor what he was doing here. It turned out that he had to live in this world, missing their kingdom. The young man was under strict surveillance since he was a member of the human delegation. That was why he could only come here in disguise. The girl was surprised that he was able to guide someone through with such a ridiculous mask. Grabbing the princess's hand, the young man said that he really was very touched. However, Etina still could not understand what he wanted from her. Shane expected that in less than a day after the arrival of the delegation, the entire demonic palace would be on its ears. But fortunately, during this long period of time, the girl did not manage to do anything strange. The counselor could not even believe that his childhood friend had become so cautious. The young man hoped to the last that the girl had not managed to do anything. In what a shock he was when he learned that the princess twice saved the king of demons from death and also helped him cope with insomnia. What was more surprising was that she and the king had even found time to go on a date together. Shane was nervous, because if His Majesty found out who Etina had been all this time, the human kingdom would definitely be in a lot of trouble. However, the girl said that they could not worry about that, because not so long ago, the king chased her out of the palace. The princess asked her friend if it was true that humans make life difficult for demons. Etina found out that the fact that the demons had started a war within their kingdom was just a common lie. Shane said that they shouldn't talk about it in the Demon King's palace. The girl offered to have a word with the young man in her room. The king thought about how he didn't feel like sleeping. Indeed, Etina was the very person who made him want to relax all the time. Suddenly, the Demon King noticed from his window that someone was sneaking away from his palace. Shane and Etina tried to sort out the reasons why the human kingdom refused to help the demons, for each side had a unique point of view. The young man then told the princess that she shouldn't give in to other people's words. She needed to believe in what she could see with her own eyes. As she ran away, the girl remembered the words of the demon from the marketplace. He had definitely said something about a demon hunter. Etina didn't even know about how deep the conflict between humans and demons went, so she had to find out for herself. The two unpleasant people came to the old lodge. Thanks to a hunter named Ogbur, there were no demons left in this neighborhood. The more the man listened, the more curious he became. The worker assured him that he was sure to be satisfied. Etina put the blade to the boy's throat and ordered him to open the doors. The girl began to descend into the basement. At the bottom, she found many imprisoned demons. She found it hard to believe that such a thing could happen in their world. Upon noticing the man, the demons began to beg to be spared. The girl used to believe that all demons were horrible, and therefore it was her duty to exterminate them. The desperate princess couldn't understand what she had to fight demons for. Suddenly, the girl heard a human voice. Etina was about to attack the humans, but stopped when she heard His Majesty's words behind her back. The king asked if she would raise her hand to attack a human. The girl was surprised that His Majesty was in such a place. The young man hid the princess from the humans. The smugglers started knocking on the demon's door and asking where the strange sounds were coming from. The girl wanted to intervene, however the king stopped her again. She should have been quieter. His Majesty decided to deal with the humans on his own with his magic. The girl turned her attention to the fact that the young man had pardoned them. The imprisoned demons began to joyfully crawl up to the king. His Majesty felt guilty, for before he had not even realized that demons could be kept imprisoned in such a horrible place. The king said that he was able to save them because of Etina. On their knees, the demons thanked their lord for going so far to save the lives of his subjects. The girl was surprised that even despite the numerous assassination attempts, the king tried to remain a good ruler to his subjects. The trust of the people he had undoubtedly won. All this time the demons had been humiliated by the humans, so Etina could understand their hatred. However, despite the fact that the king did not kill the evil people, his subjects did not demand their death. The girl even admitted that she was a little jealous of His Majesty. Since it was still dangerous in this place, Etina asked the king if he could move the affected demons to a safer area as soon as possible. The princess said that she wasn't going anywhere as she had one more thing to do. The king stated to the girl that she was good at surprising him. At first, Etina came to the castle with an offering as a servant. Jay was able to look into the king's eyes, knocked the poison soup out from under his nose, and even managed to visit the king's chambers. told the king she could help him get rid of his insomnia, and all of a sudden she made him practice all day long. And now Atina was going to be alone in such a dangerous place. The girl didn't think that the person who was following her could talk about such things. Still, the princess had some things to check out. The king's words about war had left her confused. What Atina had believed was not true. However, after seeing what the king was doing, the girl began to realize who was really to blame for the conflict between humans and demons. What is far more important than the truth right now is what the princess is going to believe from now on and the path she will take. Atina says that she wants to become just like the demon king, and for that she should stay in this place. The king asked the princess to promise that she would return to him safe and sound. The girl said that in the human world, they make promises in a special way. Atina put her hand around the king's little finger and vowed to return back unharmed. The indignant guards asked who was coming to them. The girl immediately plunged them to sleep with a few fighting moves. The princess was to find a demon hunter, Rick Ogber. These men kidnap demons on the outskirts of the kingdom and then sell them. Those who fall into their hands are turned into ordinary slaves, who are immediately discarded after they become unfit. Among the demons, there are definitely those who commit crimes against humans, but this is already His Majesty's problem. Therefore, the girl had to worry about trouble related to her people. The princess asked the man if he was an Ogber. The demon hunter asked the girl what brought her here so deep in the night. Atina asked him not to pretend as if he didn't know anything, for he had probably already gotten the report. The princess admitted that she was the one who attacked the warehouse where the demons were imprisoned. The man called it an inhuman act and asked Atina why she had chosen to take the wrong side. Ogber suggested that it might have had something to do with the fact that the girl had romantic feelings for the demon king. Hunter asked if she realized how much she would have to disappoint her subjects. The princess from the human kingdom fell in love with the demon king and sided with them. Suddenly, a strange girl told her that she killed him with her own hands. As it turned out, the mercenary was able to transform her voice, and it wasn't so easy for her to imitate the old man's voice. The girl who had tried to kill the demon king was addressing the human princess right now. The princess assumed she had been spying on her all this time. The mercenary said that was true, as the ability to hide from the eyes of others was another of her abilities. The demoness realized that Atina was quite strong, however. She did not expect the girl to turn out to be that princess. If she wasn't talking to her subordinates in the middle of the castle, the mercenary wouldn't even guess who she really was. So what the demoness heard was the conversation between Anita and Shane. The mercenary noticed that the princess began to get closer and closer to the demon king. To kill His Highness, she had to deal with his human handmaiden first, or she would continue to get in the way. Today was finally the day she could get rid of the princess. The mercenary bare her blades to begin the fight, Atina said as she had one question. She asked her opponent why she hated the demon king so much. The mercenary stated that there was no way the demon king could ever be a good ruler. He simply wasn't made to rule over so many subordinates. Being like him, he would never be able to get his hands dirty in blood. The mercenary said that the subjects honored the powerful demon king, who openly showed mercy to members of the human race. The humans would pay for their sins with their lives. The mercenary drew her dagger to kill the princess. Atina did not know the pain the humans had caused, but she decided to apologize on their behalf since he had no idea what was going on outside the human realm before. However, the princess could not die so easily. She had made a promise. Then the mercenary declared that even if she couldn't kill the princess, she couldn't afford to die at the hands of a human. The demoness was not afraid, for her will would definitely be done by her master or the rest of her comrades. The princess grabbed the mercenary and asked whose will she was doing. The girl then told her that if she wished to take her own life, let her do so alone. However, in the event that she changed her mind about killing herself, then she should wait a little longer. Then the mercenary would be able to see how Atina would change the world. It turned out that the demon king had been waiting for the princess all this time. The girl kept her promise and came back alive. The young man said he could smell blood. Atina smiled, and then said that it would be better if she obeyed and returned to her kingdom. After listening to His Majesty and seeing everything with her own eyes, the princess realized that she should change a great deal in the land of men. The girl told the king that perhaps he did not understand what such a servant could do, but she was sure that she would be able to realize a lot of things. The king had already forgotten that Athena had been given to him as a sign of respect, but that meant that the girl belonged to him, and therefore she had no rights to freedom. The princess asked the king if he would try to stop her. The young man said that he would not hinder her, but he had some conditions for her which must necessarily be observed. Hearing the king's proposal, the girl was sincerely touched by his words. Shane asked the servant what the party was in honor of on the grounds of the Demon King's palace. As it turned out, it was the annual royal ball, an important event where all the high-ranking people of the Demon Kingdom gathered. However, today was different from other celebrations. Unlike last year, the Demon King would come along with the lady. The guests were very excited about His Majesty's presence. The young ladies were crazy about his attractiveness. This world fixated on appearances was quite cruel. Despite the respect and trust of his people, it was also not uncommon for enemies to appear among true fans. The king stated that even though today was the annual planned event, it was still flattering for him to watch his subjects rejoice. His Majesty hoped that no one would leave before the event was over, because he had one very important announcement to make. Many guests could not even guess what the speech might be about. However, before beginning, the king wanted to say one more thing. Only he was interrupted by loud shouts that came from behind the doors. Shane was very frightened to hear the voice of his close friend. Suddenly, Princess Athena walked into the ballroom. No one would have thought that she would turn out to be the king's lady. Shane was even scared to think about what would happen to her in case her identity was revealed during the event. However, the young man was very pleased to see how quickly the princess was transformed, because now she looked so beautiful and elegant. After what he saw, Shane was even ready to die, because nothing else in this life could surprise him so much. The princess was delighted as everyone was watching her very closely. The subjects had to get used to it, for Athena was the first girl the king had dared to call to such an event. His Majesty said he had a condition. There would soon be an annual event, a royal ball. The young man said that if Anita would attend the ball, he would considering her request. Since the princess was human, many looked at her with unkind looks. No one could understand why she had come here as the king's partner. The prince stated that demons also had prejudices towards humans. However, after meeting Athena, the king's opinion changed drastically. That was why he asked her to come here with him. The young man wanted the other demons to also try to dispel their prejudices. The princess agreed to this. She promised that after tonight, the demon's opinion of humans would change. It seemed to the girl that it was not easy to be a king if one had to hold such events every year. His Majesty asked if there were not similar celebrations in her kingdom as well. Athena stated that there were, but she tried to escape from them. But the king thought it was strange, because the girl was a servant. Then Athena excused herself by saying that she usually takes vacations during the celebrations. The king said that the human kingdom was more progressive if maids could take vacations at will. Suddenly, a maid approached the young people with a tray with 2 glasses of red drinks on it. The princess asked what it was, for she had never seen anything like it before. The king said it was a drink made from an ingredient called hyax, a rare stone that increases magical power. As a demon king, he must drink it at all events, including this one. The young man asked the girl to share this burden with him. The princess wasn't sure if she should drink this drink since she didn't know how to use magic, but the king didn't see anything strange about it. The girl said it was quite good for the drink she would drink last in his kingdom. It seemed to His Highness that Athena was tired, as she had managed to get a lot done today. The girl said she was fine. Besides, she had a lot of fun at the ball. The princess asked the young man what important announcement was being talked about. Suddenly, Sir Daigle and his guards burst into the ballroom. The king could not understand what was happening. Athena's head began to spin. She could only hear snippets of phrases saying that His Highness had betrayed his homeland. The former henchman told the king that he must leave the throne and also bid farewell to his life. Many guests were puzzled by the betrayal on Sir Daigle's part. The man declared that he would overthrow the king and take his place. Sir Daigle said that His Majesty is in cahoots with his enemies, and he is trying to hand over the demon kingdom to humans. The guests did not agree with the accusations made, as they seemed to be utter nonsense. The man suddenly threw his sword towards the princess. The guests then noticed the holy blade that was once used to take the life of the previous demon king during a war 100 years ago. Currently, only one person was authorized to wield it. Of course, that person was the princess of the Nyanda kingdom. At that moment, the girl felt uneasy. She speculated that they might have slipped something into their drinks. If that's the case, it's likely that the king is also unwell. Sir Daigle said that the king's partner was a human and even a princess of the kingdom. In such a case, it would even be hard to come up with a reasonable excuse for what happened. To the former henchmen of the king, it all seemed strange from the beginning. The princess's sudden marriage proposal, then the offering of humans, and even the plan that the demons had been preparing for years had been put on hold. The princess excitedly asked what the plan was about. It turned out that the demons wanted to start a war with the human world. Athena then turned to His Majesty, asking if he was going to start a war with her kingdom. Sir Daigle said that the demons had no more to endure, so they must overthrow the king and fulfill their cherished wish. The traitor ordered His Majesty to be killed. The guests began to flee in fear. The knights tried to protect the king. Athena's head completely stopped thinking. They found out she was a princess. They rebelled. The demon king was planning a war with the humans. Suddenly, one of the demons was about to attack the girl. However, the king was able to protect her with his magic. His Majesty ordered the girl to run away as she would have enough strength to escape. The princess was their target. Just as Athena changed her mind, the king realized something as well. The fact that he was going to start a war was true. However, after today's celebration, he wanted to talk to the princess. He wished to establish a friendly relationship with the human world. Suddenly, Shane appeared and grabbed the girl's hand. The king told them to run away while he stopped the enemies. The girl did not want to leave her lover. Shane asked the princess if she was okay. Athena couldn't run if her condition after the poison was that bad. Suddenly, the demons noticed them. The entire castle area was already surrounded. Shane bare his blade and told the princess to run away. The girl was against it, because her friend didn't even know how to hold a sword in his hands. And that's why Shane asked the princess to run away, because besides her, no one would be able to settle this situation. Therefore, the young man said that the girl should abandon the battlefield and then return with new strength, especially since the princess had promised someone to stay unharmed. Running away, the girl said that she would definitely come back. The princess thought about the fact that she had to save the king and Shane, but her body was getting weaker by the second. Opening her eyes, the girl noticed the outline of a demon with a dagger in front of her. It was only when the princess came to her senses that she realized it was the mercenary. Athena felt that her body felt much better. It turned out that the girl had difficulty moving due to the paralyzing drink she drank. Surprisingly, the princess was able to escape from the castle. The mercenary had used the antidote, so Athena should have felt much better. The demoness began to protest, for she didn't want the princess to think as if she was taking her side. Half an hour had passed since the girl had fainted. The king was still alive, however the battle was not over. Athena asked the mercenary girl about her master. The girl suggested that it could have been the man with the eye patch who started the rebellion. The princess stated that it must be that her rescue could be considered a betrayal. The mercenary said she did not care, for he was no longer her master. Sir Daigle had been her benefactor in her youth. In her youth, she was forced to live in slavery due to being kidnapped by humans. The mercenary didn't much want to remember those horrible days. Daigle had saved her then. From that day on, she decided to dedicate her life to him. Seeing Daigle, who was filled with hatred for the people who had killed his family in a war 100 years ago, the girl was sure that she had to take revenge. For the same reason, she thought she was not afraid of death and killing. However, she was unable to kill either Athena or the king. Isn't it obvious in such a case that incompetent servants are simply eliminated? Therefore, the mercenary decided to escape and preserve her life. She wanted to live happily too, and then she could see the way the world would change for the better. Athena was glad that the mercenary didn't give up and saved her life. So the princess promised. She promised that she could definitely change this cruel world for the better. The demoness asked the girl if she planned to return to her kingdom. Athena said that she would return to the castle of demons, but the new partner did not support this plan, because such actions were too rash. It seemed that the princess should return home and defend her kingdom, for war between the two countries was likely to break out soon. However, Athena said that this was the reason why she would return to the demon castle. In order to preserve her kingdom, one must first prevent war at its source. The demoness asked if the princess was going to do it on her own. The girl said that she was. since she wanted to change this world. The demoness told the princess that she was really crazy. Then the mercenary promised to give her a ride, since it would be much faster that way. The servants were desperate to find their king, for he had disappeared from their sight almost immediately after the incident began. Sir Daigle told the king that the situation was very unfortunate. His Majesty was now surely at an end. The traitor was even surprised that the king had such a high resistance to poisons. The young man turned to the man, saying that he knew his story well. Daigle had lost 2 daughters and his wife at the front. His Majesty understood his anger, for he had also felt the pain of losing his parents. However, retribution should not be driven by anger. The king said that he himself had realized this only recently. Daigle suggested that his Majesty might have considered him guilty. The man said that the king should have had his tongue cut out for such words. Just as suddenly, the princess suddenly appeared. The girl declared that they would not be able to cope with her. Shane seemed to have managed to distract some of the demons. He hoped that the princess was safe now. The counselor noticed the demoness behind his back. The frightened young man pointed his sword in her direction. Then the girl addressed the counselor by name and said that the princess was fine now. The young man asked how she was able to know his location. The demoness said that she could fly, so she spotted him from the sky. During the fight, the young man immediately ran away as his fighting skills were not at their best. The demons went in pursuit of him. The mercenary assumed that she might know thanks to whom he had learned to run so well. However, it was necessary to leave because the enemies would get here very soon. The area around the castle was already under the control of the demons who had betrayed the king. But Shane was not afraid, for he was sure that the princess would deal with the problem very soon. Sir Daigle was surprised by Atina's presence, for he did not expect her to survive. Then the girl told about someone helping her. The princess gave the king to drink the antidote. Sir Daigle guessed that his former companion had gone over to the side of the humans. She had been loyal to him for a long time, but decided to change her choice at the end. Atina thought it was certainly worth honoring her choice. Even if their rebellion succeeded, Sir Daigle would continue to use his subordinates as mere expendable material. There was no way he would be a good ruler. The traitor laughed and ordered the soldiers to kill them. The princess only needed a few seconds to defeat all the enemies. One by one, she crippled and then threw them to the ground. Sir Daigle clapped his hands and said that the princess matched the rumors he had heard about her before. The traitor ordered everyone to stand back, for he wanted to take her life on his own. The king said not to fool the girl. Daigle had participated in the war 100 years ago. If he hadn't left the battlefield because of the misfortune that had befallen his family, he would probably be able to fight on par with Knight Arthur. The princess asked the king if he was worried about her. It seemed to her that his Majesty must be angry with her. This coup d'état was because of the princess. For if it weren't for her, no one would have suspected the king of associating with humans. In truth, His Highness was curious about the kind of person she was. The princess herself understood perfectly well that those atrocities that were once in the past were no longer relevant. However, the girl was every bit as sincere. The king was able to learn a lot from knowing that she wasn't lying. The princess was at heart flattered by his warm words. The girl admitted that initially she liked him because of his appearance. However, now everything was completely different. Suddenly, Sir Daigle threw a knife in the direction of the prince. The fun was over, which meant that it was time to proceed to the fight. The traitor told the princess that she shouldn't be too presumptuous. It was unlikely that the conflict would simply end even if she managed to defeat her enemy. As long as deep-seated hatred lives in this kingdom, someone will keep trying to take the king's life. It will never end if Sir Daigle dies, the king said, his words making sense. Despite the princess's protests, His Majesty wanted to handle it on his own. The princess had been helping the king all this time, and now it was his turn to deal with this pesky problem on his own. Also, the young man wanted the girl to stay behind. However, Atina stopped the king by calling him a fool. Now this was not only his personal problem, so His Majesty had to live. If he lived, the real problem would solve itself. The first time the girl met the king in battle, he seemed very strong to her. That is why she fell in love with him at first sight. However, in life the king turned out to be much weaker than it seemed to the princess before. Maybe beauty cannot take away from him. However, the girl was very glad that His Majesty tried to change everything. Now the princess could safely say that she had truly fallen in love with him. Atina asked the king if he could live another long life due to his demonic nature. This conflict would take a long time, and if the human and demon worlds could not find common ground before the princess died, His Majesty would surely someday be able to end these pointless wars of grudges and misjudgments once and for all. The king desperately promised the girl that this would surely happen before her death. The princess held out her hand to the prince and told him that she trusted him with all her heart. Sir Daigle was amazed at the power of Athena. This holy sword has a terrifying power. Suddenly, a golden glow completely illuminated the dark sky with its rays. The townspeople were quietly discussing the recent uprising. Sir Daigle led an army and attacked the royal castle, but he was stopped rather quickly. The demons were shocked that it was a human who had provided His Majesty with his assistance. That day, the princess of the kingdom of men infiltrated his castle. To many, this news seemed like nonsense, for there was not even a demon in this world that could use such a staggering power. It was the power of the princess's holy sword. However, the townspeople did not understand why the princess needed to help the king if she was a fierce warrior. Was it possible that His Majesty was really on the side of the humans? The rumors said that the princess was on the side of the demons. She said that she was going to make a truce between the demon kingdom and the human kingdom. It was rumored that she had saved the king more than once. No one was injured or killed by the attack of her holy sword. All the rebels had lost consciousness and only recently woke up. Would it have made sense if the princess hadn't changed her attitude towards demons? Everyone could hardly believe that the cruel princess had saved the king's life. It remains only to judge the girl by her future actions. And yet, thanks to her power, the sky was clear. At last, the townspeople could enjoy the rays of sunshine they had been waiting for so long. Come to think of it, the human lands were quite beautiful. The king woke up in his chambers. The mercenary apologized to His Majesty for scaring him so badly earlier. The king could not understand why she was in his room. The demoness asked the young man to stop looking at her with such a wary look. The mercenary came to the king to give the words of the princess. Last night, Athena had returned to her kingdom, so she was perfectly safe. The king's faithful servants begged her to stay, but she still left as there were too many important and very urgent matters awaiting her at home. The king felt saddened, but it must be admitted that he also had a lot of state problems that would have to be solved in the near future. So Athena asked him to give her something and to keep an eye on His Majesty until she returned to him. The girl said that she would change the world, and after that she would return to her beloved. However, if she failed to fulfill her dream, in that case, the king would have to handle her scheme on his own. The young man smiled fondly, for his beloved remained mad to the very end. A year later, the knight said that over 80% of the monsters had been exterminated. They also expected the 100 ranks of the soldiers of the Northwest Army to be replenished. If the allotted budget was exceeded, in that case, they would make a report. In addition, the harvest in the south this year was expected to be above normal. The extra harvested crops would be sent directly to the castle. Athena asked Sir Jansen if he omitted anything from his report. The girl speculated that this year's harvest might have exceeded the norm, as humans might have plundered the demon kingdom's lands again. Athena had repeatedly said that under no circumstances should the demon kingdom lands be plundered. The girl began to intimidate her subordinate with her appearance. The young man's knees began to cadaver. Sir Jansen began to apologize loudly. The counselor said that today's meeting went too smoothly. Thanks to her efforts, the kingdom's affairs were going great, and His Majesty the King was enjoying a quiet life. The princess's friend was very touched by how quickly she was changing. It seemed as if she had become a radically different person after the recent events. After analyzing some papers, the girl stated that the construction of the dam on the west coast had been going rather sluggish for several months now. Athena had to personally see what was going on there. If a tsunami started, the area would be dangerous for both humans and demons. The counselor was worried that the girl was taking on too much responsibility. The princess said that she had no time to think about the little things as she had too little free time. It would be great if she could bring order within the kingdom to proceed to the problem of relations with the demon kingdom. The girl stated that this way they could make this world more conducive to the existence of humans. The counselor had never before felt as excited as he did today.